Most people are taught the same equation from childhood. Work hard, keep your head down, stay disciplined, and eventually success will find you. It is a comforting idea because it gives life a simple structure. If you suffer enough today, tomorrow will reward you. If you arrive early, stay late, sacrifice your comfort, and continue pushing when everyone else is resting, you will eventually rise above them. But there is a problem with this equation. Hard work, by itself, has never guaranteed power. And sometimes, the harder you work without understanding the structure around you, the deeper you place yourself inside a trap. Look carefully at the people around you. You will find individuals who work from morning until night and remain financially anxious. They are exhausted but not free. They are responsible but not powerful. They are constantly busy, yet somehow their lives remain exactly where they were years ago. Then you will notice something strange. There are other people who appear to work less, yet their results are larger. Their income does not depend entirely on the number of hours they remain awake. Their influence extends beyond their physical presence. Their decisions affect other people, systems, businesses, audiences, or entire markets. The difference is not necessarily that one group is more disciplined. The difference is leverage. This is one of the most important distinctions you can make in your life. There is a difference between working hard and creating something that works hard for you. If you exchange 1 hour of your life for 1 unit of income, there is a natural limit to how far you can go. You have 24 hours in a day. You need sleep. You need food. You need recovery. You have a body that eventually becomes tired and a mind that eventually loses concentration. Your time is finite, and once you understand that, you begin to see the weakness in a life built entirely around selling time. You can become more efficient. You can work faster. You can wake up earlier. You can sacrifice weekends. You can eliminate distractions. All of these things may increase your productivity temporarily, but they do not remove the fundamental limitation. You are still selling yourself 1 hour at a time, and if your entire economic value disappears the moment you stop working, you have not yet created freedom. You have created dependence on your own exhaustion. This is why some hardworking people remain trapped for decades. They are not failing because they lack effort. They are failing because their effort has no multiplier. Imagine 2 people. The first person becomes exceptionally hardworking. He performs the same task for 10 years, becoming faster and more reliable. His reward is often more responsibility. Perhaps he receives a small raise. Perhaps he becomes the person everyone depends upon. But if he stops showing up, the income stops. The second person works just as hard, but he spends part of his energy learning how to create systems. He studies communication. He develops rare skills. He learns how businesses operate. He builds intellectual property. He creates relationships. He invests in assets. He develops an audience. He learns how to delegate. He creates something that can reach thousands instead of serving one person at a time. Both people work, but only one is increasing the reach of his effort. That is leverage, and leverage changes the entire psychological game. Because without leverage, you are forced to ask, how much more can I endure? With leverage, you begin asking, how much more can this effort produce? That is a completely different question. The first question creates exhaustion. The second creates strategy. This is where many people make a subtle psychological mistake. They become addicted to feeling productive rather than becoming effective. They fill their days with activity because activity gives them emotional reassurance. They can point to the hours they worked and say, "Look how much I sacrificed." But the marketplace does not reward sacrifice simply because it hurts. Life does not automatically reward you because you are tired. The world responds to results, value, scarcity, influence, and usefulness. This can sound harsh, but it is actually liberating, Because once you stop demanding that the world reward you for effort alone, you can begin studying what the world actually rewards. Ask yourself, what problem can I solve that few people can solve? What skill can I develop that makes my contribution difficult to replace? What can I build once and distribute many times? What knowledge can become an asset? What relationships can multiply opportunities? What system can continue producing results when I am not physically present? These questions move you from labor toward leverage. And notice the psychological shift. A powerless person thinks primarily about surviving the next day. A strategic person thinks about positioning himself for the next decade. One asks, how can I get through this workload? The other asks, why does this workload exist, and how can I change the structure that creates it? That second question is where power begins. You must understand that this does not mean hard work is useless. Quite the opposite. Hard work is essential when it is directed towards something that compounds. The problem is not effort. The problem is undirected effort. Working hard to acquire a rare skill is different from working hard at a task anyone can perform. Working hard to build an asset is different from working hard to maintain someone else's asset. Working hard to establish a reputation is different from working hard simply to remain busy. Effort becomes powerful when it compounds. Think of knowledge. You learn something today, and that knowledge can improve your decisions tomorrow. You develop a skill, and that skill can increase your earning power for years. You build a network, and those relationships can create opportunities you could never create alone. You build a reputation, and eventually people begin coming to you rather than requiring you to chase them. This is the architecture of leverage, and this is why you should become suspicious whenever someone tells you that the answer to every problem is simply to work harder. Sometimes the answer is to work differently. Sometimes you do not need another 12-hour day. You need a better strategy. You need to stop asking how much punishment you can tolerate and start asking what direction your effort is taking you. Because a person can spend 20 years climbing a ladder, only to discover that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. That is one of the greatest tragedies of modern life. People confuse movement with progress. They confuse exhaustion with achievement. They confuse being needed with being powerful, and they confuse being busy with being valuable. You must learn to separate these things. Your objective should not be to escape effort. Your objective should be to make effort increasingly intelligent. Work hard, but work hard on things that can grow without requiring an equal increase in your time. Develop skills that become more valuable as you improve. Build systems, create assets, protect your attention, study people, understand incentives, learn how value moves through society. And most importantly, stop measuring your life only by how much you have endured. Measure it by what your effort has built. Because if every year of your life merely produces another year of exhaustion, something must change. The question is no longer, how hard am I willing to work? The better question is, what can I build so that my work continues working for me? That is the beginning of leverage. And once you understand leverage, you will be ready to confront the next uncomfortable truth. The world does not primarily reward the person who sacrifices the most. It rewards the person who creates the most valuable position. So stop worshipping exhaustion. Build something that multiplies your effort. Because if your effort only makes you tired, you are working. Once you begin to understand leverage, another uncomfortable truth becomes impossible to ignore. The world does not reward effort in proportion to how much effort you put in. It rewards the value of the result, the difficulty of producing it, and the degree to which your contribution matters. This is where many hardworking people become frustrated. They look around and see someone earning more money, gaining more influence, or receiving more respect, and they think, I work harder than that person. Why don't I have what they have? The question sounds reasonable, but it contains a hidden assumption that the world keeps a moral scoreboard where sacrifice is automatically converted into rewards. It doesn't. You can work incredibly hard at something that has very little economic value. You can spend 12 hours doing what another person can accomplish in 2. You can become the most dependable person in an organization and still remain overlooked if your contribution is easy to replace. This is not necessarily fair or unfair. It is simply a reality of how value works. And once you accept that reality, you stop wasting emotional energy demanding recognition and start asking a much more powerful question. What makes my contribution difficult to replace? That question changes your entire position. Think about the employee who is always available. Someone asks for help, and he says yes. Someone needs another task completed, and he accepts it. Someone misses a deadline, and he stays late to repair the damage. He becomes the person everyone can rely upon. At first, this looks like strength, but there is a hidden danger. If you become known primarily as the person who will always say yes, people may not perceive you as powerful. They may perceive you as available. There is a difference. Availability is useful. Scarcity is valuable. This is why constantly proving your loyalty can sometimes produce the opposite of what you intended. The more you demonstrate that you will tolerate anything, the less incentive others have to change how they treat you. You become predictable, and predictability, when combined with unlimited availability, can make a person easy to use. The strategic person understands this. He does not try to become indispensable by doing everything. He becomes valuable by doing something that matters. That distinction is enormous. Imagine 2 people in the same organization. One completes 50 small tasks every week. Everyone knows he works hard. The other solves one difficult problem that saves the organization enormous amounts of time or money. Who is more valuable? The answer is not necessarily the person who worked the longest. It is the person whose contribution created the greater consequence. This is why you should stop obsessing over how busy you are and start studying the relationship between your effort and its impact. Ask yourself, if I disappeared tomorrow, what would people actually lose? Not emotionally, practically. Would they lose a rare skill, a critical relationship, a unique form of knowledge, a system you created, a perspective that solves problems nobody else understands? Or would someone simply divide your tasks among 3 other people? That question may be uncomfortable, but discomfort can be useful when it reveals reality, because your goal should not be to become the person who does the most. Your goal should be to become the person whose contribution has the greatest consequence. This requires developing rare and valuable abilities. It means going deeper than surface-level competence. It means understanding psychology, communication, technology, negotiation, strategy, leadership, sales, writing, analysis, or whatever domain you choose to master. You are trying to create an asymmetry. You want your abilities to become more difficult to replace than your position is to replace. This is how you increase your bargaining power, and bargaining power changes how people treat you. When you have no alternatives, you tolerate conditions. When you have options, you negotiate them. When you possess a rare skill, people seek you. When everyone can do what you do, you compete for permission. This is why personal development should not be viewed merely as self-improvement for its own sake. Skill development is also a form of strategic positioning. Every valuable skill you develop gives you another degree of freedom, but there is another psychological trap you must avoid. Do not become addicted to being the good worker. Some people build their entire identity around being responsible. They take pride in carrying everyone else's burdens. They feel guilty when they refuse requests. They believe that saying no makes them selfish. But eventually, they discover something painful. People become accustomed to whatever you consistently provide. If you continuously sacrifice your time, your sacrifice becomes the expectation. If you continuously rescue people from their mistakes, they stop learning to solve their own problems. If you continuously accept less than you deserve, people may eventually assume that less is exactly what you are worth. Boundaries therefore become part of strategy. Saying no is not automatically an act of hostility. Sometimes it is an act of self-respect. You cannot build something significant if every person around you has unlimited access to your attention. Your attention is an economic resource. Your time is an economic resource. Your reputation is an economic resource. Your energy is an economic resource, and if you distribute all of these without discrimination, you eventually have nothing left for the work that could transform your position. This is where strategic thinking separates itself from simple obedience. The obedient person asks, "What do you need me to do?" The strategic person asks, "What matters most?" The obedient person accepts every demand. The strategic person identifies priorities. The obedient person tries to prove his worth through sacrifice. The strategic person demonstrates his worth through results, and this does not mean becoming arrogant or treating people as tools. It means understanding that your life has limited resources, and therefore your choices must have hierarchy. You cannot give everything equal importance. You must decide what deserves your best effort. This is also why reputation matters. A powerful reputation is not built by telling people that you are valuable. It is built through repeated evidence. If you consistently solve difficult problems, people begin associating you with solutions. If you consistently communicate clearly, people trust your judgment. If you consistently keep your word, people trust your reliability. If you consistently produce excellent work in an area few people understand, your expertise begins to acquire authority. Eventually, your reputation begins working before you do, and that is another form of leverage. You are no longer starting from zero every morning. Your previous actions have accumulated into credibility. This is why you should think beyond immediate rewards. A small decision today can shape how people perceive you years from now. Every project becomes part of your reputation. Every interaction becomes information about your character. Every skill becomes part of your strategic arsenal. Every boundary teaches people what they can and cannot expect from you. You are always training the world how to treat you. The question is whether you are doing it consciously, so when you hear someone say, "Just work harder," do not reject hard work. Interrogate the strategy behind it. Hard work without direction can make you exhausted. Hard work without scarcity can make you replaceable. Hard work without boundaries can make you exploitable, but hard work applied to rare skills, valuable problems, strong relationships, and strategic positioning can completely change your life. The objective is not to become the busiest person in the room. It is to become the person whose presence changes the outcome. And once you reach that level, something remarkable happens. You stop begging to be noticed. You stop chasing validation. You stop competing merely on hours. People begin seeking you because your value has become difficult to ignore. That is the transition from labor to influence. And it leads naturally to the final question. What happens when you stop building only for someone else's system and begin building systems, assets, and opportunities that belong to you? Because real power begins when your value is no longer completely dependent on someone else's permission. Become valuable, become difficult to replace, but never stop there. Build until your value gives you choices, and now we arrive at the most important shift of all. If you understand that hard work without leverage can trap you, and if you understand that value comes from solving meaningful problems rather than simply exhausting yourself, then the next question becomes unavoidable. What are you actually building? Because there is a profound difference between working for a living and building a life that eventually gives you control over your own time. Most people never ask this question. They wake up, go to work, collect a paycheck, pay their expenses, recover just enough to repeat the process, and call that stability. Years pass, their income may increase slightly, their responsibilities increase, their lifestyle becomes more expensive, and eventually they realize something disturbing. They have spent decades becoming better at serving a system without ever becoming more independent from it. This is the labor trap, and the trap is powerful because it does not look like a prison. There are no bars. There is simply a calendar, a paycheck, a mortgage, a collection of obligations, and the quiet fear of what might happen if you stop. The psychological mechanism is simple. When your survival depends entirely on your labor, you become extremely cautious. You cannot easily take risks. You cannot walk away from bad opportunities. You cannot say no to every demand. You cannot spend years experimenting with something uncertain. You need the next paycheck, and when you need the next paycheck badly enough, someone else often controls the terms. This is why ownership matters. Ownership does not necessarily mean owning a giant company. It means gradually building things that continue to produce value without requiring you to exchange every additional hour for another unit of reward. It could be a business, it could be intellectual property, it could be a valuable audience, it could be a specialized skill that allows you to command much greater rates. It could be an investment portfolio. It could be a system, a product, a process, a reputation, or a body of knowledge. The form can change. The principle remains the same. You are trying to move from constantly producing value for immediate consumption toward accumulating assets that can produce value repeatedly. This requires patience, and patience is precisely what the modern world has trained many people to lose. We live in a culture obsessed with immediate rewards. Work today, get paid today, spend today, consume today. Then repeat, but power often operates on a different timeline. You sacrifice immediate comfort to build something that compounds. You learn when nobody is watching. You save when nobody applauds. You develop a skill before there is a reward for possessing it. You build relationships before you need anything from them. You create something that may fail. You experiment. You reinvest, and for a while it can appear as though nothing is happening. This is where most people quit. They expect transformation to feel dramatic, but real leverage often develops invisibly. A skill compounds. Knowledge compounds, trust compounds, capital compounds, reputation compounds, relationships compound. And then, eventually, the accumulated effect becomes visible. This is why you should stop asking only, "How much money did I make this month?" Ask a deeper question. What did I build this month that can make my future months easier? That question changes your behavior. Maybe you learned a skill. Maybe you created a product. Maybe you built a portfolio of work. Maybe you developed a process that saves you 10 hours every week. Maybe you created content that can continue reaching people long after you publish it. Maybe you strengthened a relationship with someone who expands your perspective and opportunities. These things may not immediately appear on a bank statement, but they can increase your future options. And options are a form of power. The person with no options must accept whatever is offered. The person with options can choose. That is why financial freedom is not merely about having money. At a deeper level, it is about reducing the number of situations in which fear makes your decisions for you. When you have no savings, you tolerate more. When you have no valuable skills, you negotiate from weakness. When you have no network, you have fewer opportunities. When you have no reputation, you must constantly prove yourself. When you have no assets, you must continually sell your time, but every asset you build changes the equation. A little more savings, a stronger skill, a better reputation, a larger network, a scalable product, a more efficient system. Individually, these things may appear insignificant. Together, they create independence. And independence changes psychology. You become calmer, you become less desperate, you become harder to manipulate. You can walk away from opportunities that violate your principles because your survival is not tied completely to accepting every offer. This is one of the hidden relationships between wealth and psychological power. Money is not the only form of power. But having resources gives you the ability to delay decisions, reject bad terms, survive uncertainty, and think long term. That ability is enormous. The desperate person thinks about today. The secure person can think about tomorrow. The powerful person can think about 10 years from now. And that is why ownership is ultimately a mental transformation before it becomes a financial one. You begin to think differently. Instead of asking, how can I earn more this week? You ask, what can I build that increases my earning capacity for the next decade? Instead of asking, how can I get another job? You ask, what skill would make me valuable in multiple markets? Instead of asking, how can I work more hours? You ask, what process could eliminate 10 hours of unnecessary work? Instead of asking, who will give me an opportunity? You ask, how can I create an opportunity? That is the mentality of ownership, and ownership requires accepting responsibility. You can no longer blame everything on your employer, your circumstances, your competitors, your upbringing, or the economy. You have to look at your own decisions. Where are you wasting time? Where are you underinvesting in yourself? What skills have you avoided because they are difficult? What habits keep you dependent? What expenses keep you trapped? What opportunities are you ignoring because you are afraid to fail? These questions are uncomfortable because they remove the illusion of helplessness. But there is freedom in responsibility. If everything is someone else's fault, you have no control. If something is within your responsibility, then it can potentially be changed. That does not mean circumstances are irrelevant. They matter enormously, but strategic people focus their attention on the part of reality they can influence. They build where they can build, they improve where they can improve, they adapt where they must adapt. And they stop wasting their lives waiting for perfect conditions. You do not need to become a billionaire. You do not need to build a massive corporation. You do not need to become obsessed with money. You need to become less dependent on a single source of survival. That is the beginning. Create multiple forms of value, develop skills, build assets, protect your reputation. Strengthen relationships, learn how systems work, invest intelligently, and use your income not only to consume more, but to purchase future freedom. Because there is a dangerous illusion in constantly upgrading your lifestyle. Every time your income rises, you can either increase your consumption or increase your independence. Most people choose consumption. They earn more and immediately require more, a larger house, a more expensive car. More subscriptions, more status symbols, more obligations, and suddenly the person earning twice as much is not twice as free. They are simply twice as expensive to maintain. This is why the ultimate goal should not be to look rich. It should be to become difficult to control. That is a much deeper objective. You want enough skill that you can create value. Enough resources that you can survive uncertainty. Enough discipline that you do not destroy what you build. Enough intelligence to recognize opportunities. and enough courage to act when the opportunity appears. Then your work begins to change character. You are no longer working only to survive. You are working to build. You are working to compound. You are working to create options. And eventually you may discover the greatest reward was never the money itself. It was the freedom to decide what your time was worth, because your time is your life. Every hour you sell is an hour you will never receive again. So do not waste your life merely proving that you can endure more than everyone else. Build something. Learn something rare. Create something that lasts. Turn your effort into an asset. Turn your knowledge into leverage. Turn your income into independence. And slowly, deliberately, move from being someone who works for the system to someone who has built a system of his own. Because the ultimate victory is not working harder than everyone else. It is reaching the point where your past effort creates tomorrow's freedom. Work hard, yes, but never let hard work become your prison. Build until your effort no longer owns you. Build until your time belongs to you.